The episode archive of Your Creative Push is now easier than ever to navigate. Head to yourcreativepush.com and click episodes at the top. There you'll see all the episodes listed by date and by genre. Every episode of YCP is meant to inspire you, regardless of your creative passion, but you can now easily find the ones that fit your creative medium when you need a little extra push. Your Creative Push, episode 248.
The older I get, the more creative I'm going to be. As long as I get out of my own way, it'll sort of happen.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngmin Brown, and my guest today is Tracey Fletcher King. Tracey is an artist, illustrator, printmaker, and teacher from Brisbane, Australia, and she comes on the show today for a very powerful and inspiring episode. She talks about her experiences at school and how they shaped her as an artist, and how the decision-making part of your brain and the creative part of your brain are interconnected. Tracey talks about being diagnosed with advanced breast cancer and the deal that she made with herself to say yes to everything after that happened. And she also talks about how she worked on her time management as a result of going through chemotherapy and how that was actually a positive that came out of it. Tracey and I also talked about the way in which everybody is curating their lives on social media and how that makes it so difficult to not compare yourself to someone else's perfect version of themselves. And on the flip side, Tracey talked about the notion of positive censorship and only allowing positive things to come into your life. We also talked about creating art while you're in a dark period and whether or not that's actually beneficial to do for your creative life. And one of my favorite parts of the episode is when she talks about how the creative path is a U-shaped curve and how it's never too late to start going up the other side. Just a really inspiring episode that I know you're going to love. I feel really honored to have gotten to know Tracey these past couple months, and I'm really excited for you to hear this, my conversation with Tracey Fletcher King. Enjoy. Tracey, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Youngman. It's really great to be here.
Oh, well, it's great to have you on the show and to meet you. So we like to start by having you kind of give us a brief bio, sort of how you got to the point you are today in your creative career.
Yeah, sure. The thing is, it's a really messy journey, and I want to say that up front.
Aren't they all?
They are, but I don't know, like on Instagram, they're always really, really neat, and that really drives me nuts. Everyone, it seems to be such an easy path for people when you're looking online. But
right.
Look, mine was sort of messy and stop and start, but I decided at the end of school I wanted to get into art in some form. So I applied to both art college and also to teachers college, and I got into both, but I decided to go to college and study secondary teaching because I wanted to do art and English. And, at the time it was sort of, it felt a little bit gutless, it felt like I was sort of copping out on the dream and all the rest of it. But it turned out it was really the right thing to do because the lecturers that I had there, even though it was like fairly old-fashioned in some ways, it gave me this great grounding. Whereas if I had have gone straight on to art college, I think that it would have been a lot more probably modern in its approach, and I mightn't have got the grounding in the basics that I really look at now as being a good thing. But, and it was an amazing time. We had lecturers that, when I look back now, it blows my mind that they were just lecturing people who were going to become students. Archibald Prize here in Australia is this huge, huge deal. It's like our premier art prize. And our painting lecturer won it twice. We had other lecturers who were, went on to be major gallerists and all the rest of it. But we also had very, very academic lecturers. Our drawing lecturer, Brian Dean, used to... oh, God, it was just, this is my greatest nightmare whenever I think of uni, is Monday mornings were life drawing class, first up, 8 o'clock, 3 hours, and I was always late because Sunday night was sort of a night we would go out, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so...
Monday mornings are the worst to try to be on time for anything.
I know, right? And you're 19 years old and you're walking a little bit dusty. And every time, I swear to you, every time I walked in a bit hungover, we had this guy, like, who was our model, and he was incredibly hairy, and he was huge, and he always did these really athletic poses. And I swear to you, I got his hairy butt or his bloody man bits every week. It was just traumatic. I was traumatized for years.
Yeah, that's a great way to start your week.
Oh, man, right. And, like, this went on for years too. But anyway, like, you know, we had a really academic background apart from, you know, the hairy butt thing. And so, you know, it was great. And then I went and taught for a couple of years, and I was really lucky. My first school I taught the lady who was a really gifted teacher, and I loved it. I loved secondary school teaching in general. My second school I taught with a guy who was a gifted painter. You know, I've still got heaps of his paintings around the house, but maybe not so much into the teaching side of things.
Gotcha.
But, you know, then I took 9 years away from art, away from teaching, away from everything. So I got married to a touring golf pro, and we just travelled. And he played golf, and we spent most of our year on the road. And even when we had our daughter, you know, she came with us. Obviously, we didn't leave her behind. But there's just, you know, there was no time. There was no real, you know, we never had room in the luggage for anything either. I don't know, it was all consuming. But then when Phoebes was probably 2 or 3 and we're stuck in hotel rooms all the time, the only way to keep her occupied was to, like, draw things and play games like that, because I could always keep her occupied, and it sort of made me realise I was missing art. So when we moved back to Australia it was like late, 2000 or something, I just jumped in and decided I was going to paint, and all the stuff from uni came back, and it was sort of all about image development, and I was working really hard and entering contests and doing all the stuff I should do, but I wasn't really happy. And, you know, I was selling work, but I sort of thought it was a bit shit, really. You know, it didn't feel like it was me. So I decided all I was good for was going back to teaching. So I went to uni again and did my master's, and I majored in creativity theory. And there were like 3 things that happened there that absolutely changed my life, like you wouldn't believe. And
creativity theory?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Because I wanted to understand how, like, creativity worked.
Mm-hmm.
Because it just seemed to be such an ephemeral thing to me. Like, it was always sold to us as, you know, sort of this thing you couldn't really grasp, that it was something mysterious. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. That's part of that's what we try to figure out on this podcast too, is to try to get our hands on that slippery thing that is creativity, to try to lock it down. So please continue. Yeah,
so like, I was there and I read like 2 pieces of research that absolutely blew my mind. And one was, like, I read like on creativity theory from physicists and all the rest of it. And there was a neuroscience guy who actually did research, and he looked at people who were creative and then had brain injuries and weren't creative afterwards. And he looked at what other faculties they'd sort of lost, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And the big one he found was decision making. And what they sort of found was that the decision making part of your brain and the creativity part of your brain were really sort of interconnected. You know, and that really got me thinking. I thought, you know, when I'm feeling really good about my art, I'm really decisive, you know. Mm. And you can always tell when I'm like a bit blocked or feeling a bit unmotivated, because I can't make decisions anywhere. You know, I can't pick what I want for breakfast. So it sort of really highlighted for me that it's as simple as a decision. And so that sort of got me thinking. And then I got onto this other research by a guy, I think it was Davies, and he found that creativity happened in a U-shaped curve. So when you're really young, you're at the top of the U, and then in your teenage years, you're sort of hitting that bottom of the U, which I think is when most of us sit in art class and, you know, bloody Prunella sitting next to us is doing something crazy, and we all feel as though we can't do anything. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the bottom of the U. And most people quit at that point. So their U is never a U, it's an L, you know, because they never come back to art. But then he said, you know, when you start again, it doesn't matter when you start again, you actually go up the other side of the U. And it made me realise that all my best creative years were ahead of me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Because you kind of think that creativity is easier for the young, or that if you take a break or if you take time out, that you're not going to, I don't know, like it's going to be a fight or a struggle. But what that research was telling me is that the minute you start on the other path, you're just going to get more and more creative. And it sort of like was this big freeing thing of like the best work isn't behind me, that the older I get, the more creative I'm going to be. And as long as I get out of my own way, it'll sort of happen.
And also, it's kind of inspiring because I think when people do have those breaks in their art career, whether it's, you know, a 9-year gap like you had, shorter or longer, I think they see it as this straight line, like an I, not a U.
Yeah.
And then that gap is like you break that line. It's like this huge gap in it, and it's like you can't get back to that first part. So seeing it as a U and seeing that everybody else kind of goes along this path, and all it takes is just getting around that curve, you know, and you get to go right back to where you were kind of, is super inspiring.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I thought, okay, mine maybe wasn't so much a U as like a moat, you know. It was so bloody big at the bottom. But, you know, just the thought that, you know, your creative years are later, not earlier, which it goes against everything we're probably told. And even though it's not always a smooth U, you know, I think sometimes it's like a bit of a jagged side on the other side. But, you know, it just, those things just sort of got me thinking. And I sort of started thinking like, you know, I don't really want to go back to teaching. And, you know, I'm just going to paint. And then we also had we had to like curate this exhibition and a virtual exhibition. And I looked at gender, female artists and all the rest of it, and sort of put a lot of the gender stuff to bed. Because like first time round at uni, you know, it was women artists don't get anywhere. Because remember, this is the 80s, you know, I'm not some spring chicken. And it was always women artists don't get anywhere because they look at domestic subjects, and that was always said with a mild sneer, you know, like they don't deal with grand themes and all this sort of crap. And, you know, I sat down, I looked at a lot of artists working today who are women, and that's just rubbish. And so those sort of three things just made me put everything to bed that had probably been things that I just had in my brain that were unwittingly sort of, I don't know, limiting me or something. I don't like using that speak very much, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, did you find that you were accidentally going down that path to like that gender role, I guess? Did you find that you were like kind of doing that like accidentally?
Well, prior to that, no, I'd actually worked against it really hard. Like, you know, I worked very much in landscape and you know, it was about image development and my relationship with my land, and especially because we'd spent time away and, you know, sort of getting into these big themes, which quite honestly were just a bit of a wank, really, when I look back at it. But that's what I thought I had to do. And then after doing that, I went, you know what, bugger it. I am a woman. I do have, you know, a child. You know, I'm going to embrace like what my life is, and I don't really care what I'm supposed to be doing. And it was incredibly freeing. So I just jumped in and I wanted to do watercolors, and the only place I could learn that and get my skills back, I went into botanical art, which was spectacularly stupid of me because I hate rules and it's all about rules. And that just went pear-shaped real quick. So, you know, that was ugly. But then, you know, I was sort of just getting out there, selling my work a bit in places and, you know, just going along. And then in 2013, just out of nowhere, I was diagnosed with very advanced breast cancer. And I just, you know, it was just like 11 months of hellish treatment, you know, multiple operations and chemo forever and radiation for months. And I just came out the other side and it was like, oh my God, you know, like what's the worst that's going to happen? Like, honestly, if my paintings don't sell, you know, it's not that big a deal in the scheme of things, you know. So I just made a deal with myself to just say yes to things. And then for 3 years, I just said yes. And there was, oh my God, there were some spectacular failures in there, let me tell you. But there was some fantastic things too. And I did a lot of illustration work, which I had no training in. I've got no clue what I was doing, but I just said, yep, I can give that a go. And, and people were amazing. They got in and gave me a chance, and I did packaging for companies, for, tea companies. I did, just so many things. And it was great, but it was also, I don't know that I'm really good at maybe painting to order. Like, they always have ideas. And it's like, can you do this, this and this? And it's like, like one day I found myself painting a rhinoceros, a strawberry, and something else. And I was thinking, like, what are you doing? Like, I don't ever want to paint a rhinoceros ever again, because, like, it's just not my thing.
Right.
But, I'm grinding away over this rhinoceros. And mind you, it turned out good. But, I just thought, like, what am I doing? So
right.
I sort of started to probably go back to my roots a little bit and go back to the things I loved. And they were painting with watercolours in a fairly realistic manner, and doing probably what I'd call contemporary still lifes, and doing lino cuts, and doing big lino cuts. Like, these are A3 size blocks and above. And sort of I just thought, well, bugger it. I'm just going to give it a go. And, it's been going great. Like, my work sales, I've got a wholesale agent, I've got a solo exhibition next year.
Yeah.
But then, it was a big turning point, was sort of to trust my own instincts and to sort of pursue it again, if you know what I mean.
For sure. Yeah, I think when something like that comes up, when you get bad news or life-changing news, or something that you have to completely, like, kind of rethink things.
Yeah.
I think there's two paths that people go down. One is to shut down and not pursue your passion, like to let that go.
Yeah.
And the other one is to approach it like full-heartedly and say yes to everything, which I think is what you did. Would you say that maybe you pushed too hard? Like you said yes to too many things?
Oh, yeah, way too many things. Like, I just, honestly, I was like, oh, my God, I was like insane. It was like, do you want to create 3 paintings for this, like this design? Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, look, I did. I said way too many. I wasn't discerning at all. There was no sense of, what might be a good idea. Like, the first year especially, I was appalling. I took on jobs that caused so much stress, and as much as you try and think you're going to keep it all under control and you're going to be really cool about it and keep it, working, I just didn't. I just, took on stuff that really I had to learn a lot to be able to do. Like, I'm a tech tragic. So, having to learn to use different programs and things. It was crazy. But, in there was also just some amazing highlights. So I think on the balance of it, it worked really, really well. And I did a lot that I never would have done otherwise. And at the end of the day, it wasn't the worst thing. It like, even the things that were disasters, they still worked out. They weren't that big a deal. And, 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said, oh, my God, if someone decided they didn't like it, or, if I had to chase payment, which I find you have to do, and I'm bad at that,
Yeah, sure.
I'm just bad at that stuff. And I would have thought that was something I wouldn't be able to do. But, like, I learned I was pretty good at going, no, you've got to pay up. Come on, keep harassing them.
Don't make me stick my...
Exactly, yeah. I'm going to stick my cat onto you, sucker. But, so even those things, like, they were all pretty positive, really. And, and that's, it's been great. But where I am now is that the cancer's back. And that sucks, But it's also, it's treatable. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, congrats to you for beating it for the first time and getting through it. And
Yeah.
I know that now you're gearing up and battling it again. But at least maybe now you have a little bit of experience knowing what to take on and what not to take on. And something that I advise people on this podcast, not that I'm necessarily the person to give this advice, but to bring it on, like kind of like you do, like with whatever kind of creative things, like opportunities that come into your lap, to maybe say yes to it the first time, to just try it out, and realize that you're going to learn something from it, even if it does kind of send you down a slightly different path that you were thinking of going down. You're going to learn something from it, and to not be scared of the knowledge that you don't know.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And and look, this time around too, because it does affect the way you work, and you go through flat patches and everything else because you've got so much other crap going on. Mm-hmm. But I also know that passes. Like last time that felt scary. This time I know that it's just a stage. You go through it and then you get back to painting and you get back to thinking about painting and, you sort of like everything normalizes again. And you know that this time around, you know that like chemo happens in waves and you have a few crap days every week and then you're good the rest of the week and you get in and you work when you can. And it's actually really good at making you good at time management because you never have enough time. Like we all think we need these massive blocks of time, but the reality is you never have enough time and that's just an excuse. So when the time's taken away and, you're down to 3 days a week sort of thing, you make the most of them and you just get in and work like crazy, and it's fantastic.
And instead of making that excuse, because I do agree that so many people with so many different things in their life, that full-time job, kids, whatever else life throws at you, that the time thing is a big excuse that a lot of people use, and it is true. You don't have time, you don't have enough time, but you can always find that certain amount of time. And if like you're saying, you get used to it, and you can kind of realize that those short-term you patterns, that creativity goes on, not just the long-term ones, but the short-term ones where it comes, it goes, it ebbs, it flows, it's rough, it's easy. And knowing yourself and practicing yourself with that kind of a thing, then when it comes along again, when it gets harder again, you kind of know what to expect and you can kind of handle it a little bit more effectively and make use of that little time that you can find.
See, like you said that so much better than I did.
No, you said it better.
No, but you know what I mean? But look, and that's the thing. It's like, look, I choose to see cancer as a chronic illness. If I had a heart disease, I would be in treatment the rest of my life. And it's changing, the treatments that are coming out now are just, it's mind-boggling. Just in the last 3 months, there's been 2 changes that could literally triple my lifespan, which is extraordinary.
In the last 3 months, you said?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I know.
That's so cool.
I know. It's like, honestly, I walk in and like I look at the oncologist and because I see him every week for chemo and he's like, guess what? And it's like, oh my God, you've got more news. And like
gossip.
Oh, it is. It's like, I think this one could work for you. Oh, maybe not that. Oh, so cool. You know what I mean? But it's just a chronic condition. And I think if you treat it like that, and sometimes I think being a parent's a chronic condition. Sometimes I think being married's a chronic condition. But, if we all have those challenges and you just got to put it aside. And to me, that comes back to that decision-making thing. And it's just you decide to get in and just, I'm really good at tricking myself into it. Like I say, I'll just do something for 10 minutes, and then I go, I'll do another 10. I'll do another 10. And before you know it, you've gotten a heap done. And also I like that this has forced me to find sort of shortcuts as well. Like, you don't waft around and go, I'll try and just really get that perfect there. And you haven't got time. And half the time it turns out perfect as well anyway. So you're just agonizing over nothing. Right. And I think it makes my technique better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You don't have that luxury of faffing around and wasting time. And from that point of view, it's great. And it keeps it all in perspective. At the end of the day, a painting not going well or me not having a good painting day is not the thing that most stresses me, And 5 years
Right.
ago, it did. If I had a bad painting day, I was like, I was not a happy camper at all.
Right, especially because it so closely defines like your future as a painter. Or I think a lot of creative people can relate to that idea when something doesn't go right, or when you can't quite make the right decision, or you can't get it whatever it is that you're doing perfect, and you just have a bad creative day, which we all have. We all have many of those
Yeah.
where just things aren't going right, and just everything doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like it's a part of you. That can be this like huge thing that defines the rest of your creative life. Like clearly you're not an artist now. Clearly you're not a musician, photographer, whatever it is.
Oh, exactly.
So to try to see it as not, a bad creative day is not like that big of a deal in the long run, and something that shouldn't like hold you back for, 2 months until you pick up the pencil again. I think is a huge lesson there.
Like we make it really high stakes, and it doesn't have to be.
Right.
And I just think, but you know what I do think really messes with your head too is like the internet. Like, I mean, look, I love the internet, in terms of artists, and what it's done is, I've got friends who are painters in like Seattle, and I just FaceTime her when a painting's not working going, what do you think? I mean, like that sort of thing blows my mind, and it's fantastic. But what I hate is somehow the internet sometimes reminds me, and I'm talking more about probably Instagram, although I love Instagram and completely addicted. It almost puts you in that position of being back in that classroom when you're 12 years old. And, you paint something, and then you're going through your feed and you see someone else has painted something better, and they're doing something more interesting, and they're doing, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And you've really got to watch it, because it's like this spiral of just, going back to that point of, well, everyone else is better than me. They're more productive. They're more creative. They're more, they've got their crap together business-wise, and they're getting their work out there, and they're doing this and doing that. And, like, I really have to keep a lid on that myself and make sure I'm going in when I'm in a good place.
Right.
Because, otherwise it's just, yeah. And I think people don't show their process much. They don't show that their studio looks like a bomb zone. They don't, they don't show that the washing is like, bloody Great Wall of China in the laundry.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's curating their lives so heavily now with social media that I think then when you're doing something creative, it makes it even more high stakes. Do you know what I mean? Because you've got to have everything else together. And the reality is you don't, and they're all lying, they've just kicked all the washing out the back door so the laundry looks good. And, the kids are eating Cheerios for dinner, and you know what I mean? It's all a lie, and I think you just got to keep that in mind when you're on there.
It's so tough, though, because like you said, it is that curated thing, but compare and despair, for real.
Oh, yeah.
It's so hard to, though, because of the fact that that's, Instagram and Facebook and all these places are where you go to find inspiration, or to be inspired by other artists, to see that other artists are able to have that end result, but all you're seeing is that end result. You're not seeing, all of the trash, the messed up canvases, or the hours and hours and hours of time that they spent where it didn't work, and the fights that they're having with their husband or their wives because they're spending too much time, and the money struggles and everything else that goes with it. So that's kind of what this podcast is for, to try to look under that layer, like to see the face of art and the creative process without the makeup on, without the flashy filters on. So
yeah. Well, I'm giving you the bald version here. So.
Yeah. Well,
I'm taking it a step further. Talk about commitment, right?
It's beautiful, though. It's beautiful. But I think that's where the beauty of the whole creative process is, because it's so much of a part of you, like what you're able to bring out into the world. And I think it's so important to see that process, and to see the pain and the struggles, and the fact that you're able to get through it with whatever kind of creative process that you're able to get that part of yourself out there, as opposed to being that L-shaped curve, like L for loser, where you just give up, and just go on a different path, and just abandon the thing that you're able to use to get yourself out there like that.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Like I sort of, I was talking the other day with my daughter, and I said, I don't even want the U. I want to be a J, I want like creative, I just, like, a U's not good enough. I don't want to be creative like I was when I was 3, because I sucked when I was 3. So I want it to be a J.
Or an S.
Yeah, why not? Really, we can pick lots of letters there, but, well, see, I think mine's been a bit of a W at times, more than a U.
Okay.
I think we can probably discuss letters all day there, but...
It'll be the Sesame Street version of the
yeah,
podcast.
Exactly.
I'm glad that you brought up the decision-making thing again.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about this recently, and not just... it's not just as simple as, like, making decisions, like, on a day-to-day basis, but I think some people get flustered sometimes when they're faced with a decision in their art or their whatever they're doing creatively. And I think that sometimes they think that decisions are a bad thing when you're faced with this, like, fork in the road where you could go one way or you can go the other way. But I always think that that's a sign that you're on the right path, because that means that you have a chance to be innovative and to go in a new direction, as opposed to if you're not making decisions while you're getting to your creative process every single day, you're just doing the same thing over and over again, and you're probably not progressing. So if you are faced with a lot of decisions, that probably means that you're on the right path.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And the other thing I do is, like, when I'm a bit blocked, I will, or things aren't coming easily and I know I'm, like, dithering, I'll go and I'll do something where I've got to make lots of decisions. Like, I kind of figure if I warm up the decision-making part of my brain, so I'll go bake something or do something like that so that my brain's having to make decisions. And, like, sometimes, like, the terrible thing is I'll make up recipes, which can be diabolical. But I figure then I'm making myself make decisions, And then I come back to it, and I always work better after that. And, it could be completely psycho, and I'm sure the poor guy who did the research is, if he ever heard this, would be horrified. But I just sort of think that you've got to get in and do something that means you're making decisions, like to sort of wake that part of your brain up when it's not going well. And it's, I think you've got to be decision fit.
Decision fit. I like that.
Yeah, like whether it's like I have a heap of tea, it's like, what sort of tea am I going to have? Like, make that decision. Like, it's as simple as that. And I think if you're making lots of them, then it's easy to make lots of decisions in your work. I think it translates. So it does for me, but that could just be because I've convinced myself of that. But hey, it works. So that's the good thing.
Yeah, and there's so much power in it, not just for I love what you said, because it's not just about the decisions that you're making with your art or with your whatever your creative passion is. It's just being a person that is able to do different things throughout the day. I think it was actually Sandra, our mutual friend who was also on the show, Sandra Busby, who in the Facebook group she was mentioning about she got into the bathtub and sat the opposite direction. And it was that simple decision where it's just like, oh, wow, like this, I'm experiencing this small thing in a different way, or like going to work through a different route, even if it's just one different turn. It's just kind of keeping your brain always, like you said, decision fit. I think that's the perfect description for it.
Look, I mean, I'm so psycho. I've actually, because I work here at home in the studio, I've actually gone upstairs, got changed, like come back down, like, new start. And like things like that work. Like you feel a bit silly doing them sometimes, but, and happily I live with 2 people who don't even notice when I do it. So, I don't have to be embarrassed around them. Every now and again, my husband goes, he's going like, were you wearing something different? It's like, no. So that's cool.
That's just a figment of your imagination, honey.
Yeah, like, really, like you just pay no attention. But, no, so, I'll go and get changed or, change up the mug my coffee's in, all that sort of, just those little things. I'll change the playlist I listen to, anything I can do to just change it up and, sort of keep my brain fresh. And that always seems to just shake me out of, the crap days when you're working badly. And if that doesn't work, then there's always chocolate and alcohol. So, there's always something you can do.
For sure. Well, now with the kind of ups and downs that you go through when you're going through something like chemo, have you noticed changes in your art, like on a day-to-day basis, like as it actually comes out?
Yeah. Last time I Oh, well, last time, the first time round, they would give me, I would have steroids for a few days, which was genius because let me tell you, you can get a lot of shit done on those things. It was awesome.
All right, noted. Okay, I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
So, like, I'd seriously, the house would be sparkling, like, meals would be in the freezer. I would have painted 20 things. It was just incredible. And then there's an obvious crash, and then the chemo hits, and those paintings that I would sort of paint up in bed, and because you just can't move for a few days, and they were dark. They were, they were not pretty. So this time I've avoided doing that on those days. Although this time I don't get steroids, which I think is a bit sucky, because I was looking forward to that.
What a jip!
It was the only thing I was looking forward to. I thought, I'll get those steroids again. But yeah. So this time I made the decision that, like, I have basically 48 hours where I'm out of action every week, and I just don't draw in that time. Like, I'll watch YouTube videos. I've got art books that I look at. There's a few artists that I really love, and I try and be more positive because I used to find there would be a hangover from those sort of dark pieces, if you know what I mean.
So you would I think that sometimes it's good for creative people to be able to, when if you're going through something, and you're not feeling like your normal self, to kind of paint through it. But would you say that doesn't work for you? You're saying you don't like the residual effects of actually like kind of putting that out into the world?
No, look, it just didn't work well for me. Like, I kept journals. And, I threw them away after a couple of years because it was just really painful to look at. Yeah, it's different.
Take your time.
Like, in general, I would say, no, it didn't work for me because I need to be positive, and I don't know, I think, like, last time I sort of probably embraced the dark times as well as the good. Mm-hmm. This time I'm going, you know what? I just can't be bothered with that.
Sure.
I just want to even out a bit, like, because it's so up and down. And if you don't keep a handle on it, you're just going through these massive, like, highs and lows. And then that does mess with how you see yourself creatively too, because then you start going, well, which one am I? Am I this really, really dark person who thinks really bad things? Mm-hmm. Or am I, this chipmunk on speed? Like, which one am I, And, like, you're both of those, but I sort of had divided those by doing it that way. And you can't help but face the harshness of it. Like, treatment sucks, and I just sort of find that I get through it better this time, especially by trying to be more positive. But I think too, I don't have the big downs. Last time, like, I can't describe to you how hyper you'd be for 3 days, and then you go off the steroids just as the chemo hits. So you would it was like running into a brick wall every round. It was just crazy. So that was sort of, that was really just hard to cope with in general. Whereas this time there's no steroids. Like, it's improved that much. There's none of that. So this time you're sort of like, I had the chemo on a Friday afternoon, and by Friday night I feel ordinary. Saturday I'm pretty crappy. Mm-hmm. By Sunday lunchtime I start coming up. Monday morning I feel pretty good. So it's sort of this gentler, like, it's still shit, like, don't get me wrong, but it's sort of a gentler flow, and I'm finding I'm staying steadier emotionally, and I find that my work is sort of better as well. My work is sort of reminding me to be myself rather than to be cancer girl, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So I'm sort of, I like using that time on Saturday. I'll cruise a bit of YouTube if I feel up to it. I'm working my way through this book. There's an artist I love called Cressida Campbell, and this book came out years ago, and it's like a huge doorstop. It weighs like 10 kilos. And I look through that on a Saturday, and, I find that I'm going to be lying around doing nothing. I might as well use it to sort of inspire myself rather than sort of revel in all the crap things that are going to happen, because they're going to happen. So I'll deal with them when I get there, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and I think it's really important. I really appreciate you kind of expounding on that because, like I was saying before, sometimes the advice is to push through it, if you're feeling dark, then be dark in your art or change it up, you know what I mean? And I think that the important advice there is for people to really ask themselves, like, what am I getting out of this? What am I getting out of putting myself out there, putting my darkness out there? Like, when you're able to do that, like, do you feel better? Like, do you feel like you got it out of you? Or do you feel like, you have just defined yourself as something that you're not? One of the most powerful messages of this podcast, I think, is the power of just telling yourself what you want to be, or telling yourself what you are, or telling yourself what you want to be in 5 years, 10 years. And the more you tell yourself that you're an artist or that you're or whatever you want to be, the more you convince yourself that you're that thing. So if you're actually creating this darker side of yourself over and over again, and you're looking upon it and you're like, wow, is that really who I am? Maybe that's not the best thing for you. So to really analyze what you're getting out of it and change accordingly and do accordingly, like either do it or don't do it. And if you don't want to do it, then, do like what you did. You can still be creative by reading books or cruising YouTube, as you say. I can't cruise YouTube. I like fall into an abyss, I feel like, when I go on YouTube, because there's just so many good videos and stuff out there. But to really just kind of analyze and ask yourself, why am I doing this? What is this doing for me? And what should I do in the future?
Yeah, and also, you don't have to share it. Like, if you do, like, I never showed anyone those dark journals that I kept, that was totally private. Like, I think now we all feel as though we have to share a lot more, on the internet with Instagram and everything else. You're supposed to be sharing more of yourself. And I know this goes against the whole curated thing, but, some of that stuff's, it's a temporary thing. It's where you are just at that moment. And when you're going through something extreme, that's not necessarily who you are. It's not necessarily anything to do with you as a person. It's the situation. It's not you. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so, like, you just need to put that away. For me, that doesn't work, because it just, then it consumes your life. And I don't think that's a good thing, because I have a life beyond treatment. I want to get on with that. And but it's a hard thing to do. Like, we all get very caught up in it. And, I do think we live in a world that celebrates dark places. There's not a lot of positivity out there. I stopped watching the news 4 years ago.
I'm like 3 years now.
And I just don't watch it. And I love that I don't watch it, because I'm thinking, this is just, it's not a healthy thing. And I think it's a little bit like that sometimes with painting through the dark times. Maybe you've got to start looking at the bright side of things. And I know it's a bit Pollyanna and all the rest of it, but, it works. If you've got that positive mindset, then, things are easier. Like, it's easier if you think good things, Yeah, it's tough if you're thinking crap.
I could not agree more. And like you said, it is a tough thing, especially when there's so much, tragedy porn out there. Like, like you said, focusing on the negativity. And then the only positive things that you do see are these, like we were talking about, these like polished, perfect looking, like curated views, tiny little peeks into people's lives. And you can't really get a genuine, like, kind of positive feel. So I think you're right. I think it's really being vigilant about what you consume, about what you put into your brain, what you let your eyeballs see and let your ears listen to, and to be like really aware of that. And I think stopping listening to the news was one of the best things I could do for myself. Even though my wife makes fun of me all the time for not knowing what's going on in the world, I think it's really important to kind of curate what you see and kind of what you bring into your own life.
Yeah, I call it positive censorship.
I like that.
It's like I'm not dealing with that rubbish. Like, I really don't care for politicians in general, it turns out. And, it's just like, it is all just tragedy. It's just awful. And I don't know, I just think the world is heading that way. And, things like this make you realise that, things can get personally pretty bad and pretty dark. So who cares, get in and find the positive. And have fun. Like, have fun with your work. It's not going to, it's not high stakes. Bad painting is not going to really damage you in the long run. And, it's as simple as that.
I wanted to go back to the story that you were telling us earlier about that kind of 9-year gap that you had when you were kind of on tour with your husband. I wanted to get into your mindset after that 9 years was over and you decided that you wanted to get back into it. What was that like? And would you have any advice for anybody else that's listening that maybe has had a long gap in their creative career, so to speak, and they are, kind of on that edge thinking about going back into it, but they're scared of that big kind of gap that we were talking about before, and not really seeing that their creative life is quite made that curve around the U yet?
Yeah. Look, it was scary. I was really embarrassed at first.
How so?
Well, like my skills weren't what they were, like as I said, like college that first time around was very skills based. And, there was a lot of academic drawing. There was a lot of colour mixing and, endless weeks of colour mixing, which I'm grateful for now. But at the time I hated. But like you come back to it and you've lost that. You've lost your muscle memory with a brush or a pencil. You don't see tone as well. You don't, and you have to be prepared that you're going to be crap for a while. And, I would hide my work at first. I didn't really show anyone. Like it was, like I was also working as a bookkeeper. And can I tell you, the worst bookkeeper in the history of the world because, oh my God, I hate maths. But I was working as a bookkeeper as well. And then I would come home and I'd paint these appalling paintings. And I would say it took me 12 months before I had anything that I wasn't embarrassed to show. But what I would do is I would concentrate on sort of getting my skills back. So I'd do a lot of tonal studies and things because for me, skills, if I have the skills, I can get what's in my head out onto the page. So I do like having those skills. And, yeah, for a year I just basically hid. So, and look, if you've got to hide and just do it and not tell anyone for 12 months till you're ready to show someone, what's the big deal? Like, you don't have to tell everyone that you're trying to learn to paint. Like, why can't it be a private thing till you're ready? That's what I did. Like, even though Matt and Phoebes knew I was painting, they didn't see anything because, quite frankly, it was appalling. And, but I kind of embraced that. Like, I knew it was going to be bad. I didn't realise it was going to be quite that bad. But, then I came out the other side and I always keep work that I did ages ago. Like I never throw it away because when I'm feeling really bad, I go back and I look at my crap work and go, oh, yeah, I'm doing better than that now, baby. So,
yeah.
That's my personal pep talk is to go back and look at my really bad things. So always keep your bad things because there's going to come a day you're going to be really pleased that, you've improved so much.
Yeah, it's one of the best things that you can do is to go back and look at that bad work.
Yeah.
And also to see how further you can go if you keep working just as hard as you worked from that point to this point. You see that you really might become a J if you keep working.
Yeah, exactly, But, look, it was, I was appalling. And I was grumpy all the time too for that year.
Because of the fact that you weren't quite where you wanted to be?
Yeah, I was impatient. Because you remember where you were. I think that's the hard thing when you were working and then you stop and then you go back is you remember where you were. But, I kind of think if you were running a marathon and then you didn't run a marathon for 9 years and you wouldn't expect to go back to your old times, straight off the bat. But with art or music or even writing, I think we do. We expect that those skills somehow just lie dormant and will magically wake up back where they were, But it's not. It's not Sleeping Beauty, is it? It's I think it's more like the bloody witch crone is creativity.
You're absolutely right, and I think that it's really important if you do get back to your art to give yourself credit too, and to not be too hard on yourself and be like, oh man, like these 9 years, like why do I have to go through this now 9 years later? It's to be like, hey, I'm doing it. Like I'm finally doing it. Yes, there was a hiccup.
Yeah.
Yes, there was a small gap, but like, look, I'm trying, and to kind of reward yourself for that and congratulate yourself for the fact that you're back on the path.
Yeah.
The righteous path.
Absolutely. And you know what? I look at my paintings now, and because you do go, how you go, like you'll do something and then you move on to something else, and then you rarely stay on that same path. And, the work I'm doing now sort of harks back to the skills I learned in that dark botanical painting stage. Those skills that I gained there, I'm actually using now. I don't use them in botanicals, but, you're always going to use skills. You're always going to use, anytime you paint or you're doing something creative, you're actually doing something that you're putting away in like your creative library, and you can take that back out again anytime you need it. And I think you've just got to embrace it more than anything. Like, going in knowing you're going to be a bit crap and just wait it out.
Wait it out and keep building up that arsenal of tools.
Yeah, exactly. We all need tools.
Absolutely. Tracey, this has been wonderful, and I really appreciate you kind of opening up and telling us about your creative life. But it's time for the cherry on top of this, which is the final push. And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today, and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions. If they're going through something themselves, if they have had a long gap in their creative career, or if they just needed just a little bit of an extra push today.
I think the main thing, and the thing that really keeps me going every day, whether things are hard or whether they're great, is coming back to that whole, the U-shaped curve. And like, your best creative days are ahead of you, because you're going to have bad days in creativity. You're going to have bad days personally, which are going to mess with your creativity. It's messy. It's always messy, and it always ebbs and flows. But as long as you're sort of heading up that other side of the curve, as long as you are accepting that you can be more creative tomorrow than you are today, then you're going to be fine. You're going to be ahead of the curve, and, maybe you will have, be a creative J rather than a U,
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I remind myself of, is that my best creative days are ahead of me. Anything I do today, it'll be better tomorrow. That's pretty much what I would say. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life, that doesn't change.
Your best creative days are ahead of you, everybody. And also,
that's right.
It's going to be messy, but that's why, artists wear smocks.
That's why exactly.
you can wash up afterwards. It's just expect it to be messy and just do it anyway.
Absolutely. It's going to be messy, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to be fun, and it's going to be crazy and frustrating, and every emotion gets crammed into creative practice. And I actually love that, because we sort of go through fairly bland lives most of the time. And I like that it all gets crammed in there. You get to be angry and pissed on days, and you get to be happy on others. And I love that. And you get to cram it all into your work. And, you don't have to be an adult when you're doing that. You can be into what you're doing.
I love it. Tracey, thank you so much for coming on the show, and thank you for sharing your story. You are such a positive person, and I love your mentality, and you're really an inspiration to us all. So thank you so much.
No, my pleasure. Thank you very much for asking me. It's been a great experience.
It's been a great experience for us too, so thank you.
Thank you.
And you can find Tracey on her website, which is traceyfletcherking.com. That's TRACEY. And on Instagram and Etsy, she is Tracey Fletcher King. And we'll have everything we talked about today, including links to all of her stuff, at yourcreativepush.com/Tracey. That's TRACEY. Tracey, thanks again.
No problem. Thanks, Youngman.
Boom. Such great stuff in this episode. And 2 points I want to make, and then a question for you. The first one is the idea of being decision fit. Sometimes we get flustered when we have big decisions to make, whether it's in our creative process or in our creative life. But the fact that you have decisions to make is really a sign that you're on the right path, and the sign that you're growing. Because if you don't have any decisions to make every single day, then you're not challenging yourself enough, and you're not moving forward and progressing in your work and your creative life. So just really value those decisions and be decision fit. Be ready to make them on a daily basis. And the second thing is that U-shaped curve of creativity. I love this idea. It was really inspiring to me to think about, because so often all these creative people that come on the show talk about how Some of them start creating when they're a kid and keep going and don't have any hiccups. They don't have any lulls, and the L shape doesn't start in their creative career. It's just a straight line. They keep going. But for most of us, there is some sort of a gap in our creative output. And when you see that so many of us have this U-shaped curve of creativity, it is inspiring because you know that you can get back to where you once were. And even better, like Tracey said, to keep going, to have that U keep going and make it into a J. Knowing that it is a U-turn in your creative journey makes it that much easier to get back to your journey so that you don't get disheartened by that gap. Know that your best creative days are ahead of you, like Tracey said, and just get back on the path. So now for my question for you, what letter do you see your creative path being? Because I think some people are on different ones. Like Tracey was saying, maybe you get back to your work and then you have another gap and it becomes a W, or maybe it's like a weird S-shaped curve. I don't know. What letter do you see yourself on? Head to the Facebook group, yourcreativepush.com/group. I'll have a post up there where you can chime in and tell us what you think that your path is or what you want it to be. On Monday's show, we have Rob DiTeodoro. Rob is a really talented artist with a really cool style, and he and I just had this awesome back and forth. We are tuned into the same type of creative frequency, so it was a really fun discussion with him. If you want to find out more about Rob, you can find him on Instagram as Rob_DiTeodoro. That's DiTeodoro. Or we'll have that linked up at today's show notes page alongside everything we talked about today with Tracey at yourcreativepush.com/248. But that's all I've got for you today. So hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will be here for you on Monday if you need the push again. I love you all so much. Go get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.